Welcome to the Leadership Variations Unfiltered podcast, where each limited run series tackles the leadership problems no one is naming, how women in STEM actually succeed, why leadership fads always fail, and where talent strategy breaks down when the stakes are the highest. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Jennifer Webb, a trailblazer in one of the most transformative industries of our time, synthetic biology. Just saying that is really exciting to me. Jennifer is the general manager of the biosolutions business unit at Ginkgo BioWorks, where she leads a significant share of the company's revenue, overseeing everything from R&D and business development to customer delivery. That's huge. Ginkgo isn't just programming cells to solve global problems. They're democratizing access to advanced biological engineering across industries like pharma, food, agriculture, and sustainable manufacturing. And Jennifer is at the helm of all of this growth. With an MS in chemical engineering from Stanford and a BS in bioengineering from the University of Arizona, she has built her career across technical, operational, and commercial roles. Wow, if that is not just a successful STEM women leader, I don't even know what is. I'm so honored to have you here, Jennifer. Thank you so much. Are you ready to jump into our podcast today?
Yeah, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today.
Well, not as much as I am, and our guests are in for a treat. Thank you so much. So let's start with where you are. I mean, I think we got a hint of where you are, but one of the things I love to know, since I'm coaching senior women in STEM, I always kind of see that the most powerful parts of someone's leadership are not on their resume. So with that in mind, and thinking about where you're leading today, is there something meaningful that you want to talk about that you've built or influenced that others don't see from the outside that you want to talk about?
Sure. I think it's very true that for anyone's role, you might have an impression of what that role is, and it's hard to kind of know what the inner workings are. I think a couple things are interesting about my role at Ginkgo and the time that I've been there, which is about 7 years now. Probably two things are interesting. One is that about a year ago now, we went through a major restructuring.
Mm-hmm.
And so early parts of my years were massive growth in terms of revenue and headcount. We had several fundraisers. We had the IPO. I mean, really massive growth rate. And that was super exciting and fascinating. And then, of course, becoming a public company has its own sort of challenges and changes that come with it. And so about a year ago, we went through a major restructuring where we decided to kind of verticalize our business and created the business units, of one of which I now lead. And so what has been very interesting to me was thinking about, first of all, stepping into that general manager role and leveraging strengths that I probably hadn't used in a while, back more core to sort of my technical background and manufacturing background, and sort of being able to toggle between different parts of my career and things that I've learned in this new role. And one of the other things that's been really challenging, but that I'm proud of, is going through that kind of change at a company can be difficult for people, right? It's very disruptive. And I think like learning how to help people kind of manage expectations in that change and be excited about something that can at first feel a little bit scary has been challenging to navigate, but also kind of fun. And I'm really excited about the change that we've gone through in even the last year, sort of people getting into new ways of working, having a new leader, me, and also, trying to get people to feel excited about our sort of new business unit and ways of working. And so that's one thing I think that on the surface, it feels like, sort of like it did an org change, check, done. But the work that actually goes into helping people think about what that means for their roles is not small. And so I've been enjoying that, even though it's been, difficult.
So it's been hard making the change. What about for the people that you're now leading? What have you done you said it's been fun. So to make it fun for them or to make it less stressful, how have you been able to use your own leadership skills to help them adjust?
One thing that's useful to know before I explain my answer, my previous role, I was leading the commercial team. So I was chief commercial officer and I had all of the commercial functions.
Nice.
So all of business development and sales operations
Wow.
and alliance management, those kinds of things for the whole company. And what happened in the restructuring as we moved into business units, many of my team moved into their new business units. And I inherited lots of teams that used to be sort of functional peers, let's say, to the commercial
Oh, wow.
organization. And so I had a portion of my team who was very used to working with me, and I had been working with for a long time. And we had all kind of grown together. And some people were newer and some people were older. And I had lots of people who were maybe observers of my leadership style for a long time, but didn't know me directly. One of the things that was really interesting or like impactful for me was that I kind of had to realize that I had to rebuild trust with, or build trust, not even rebuild, build trust with that team because they really didn't know me. And I started to see differences in how the team was performing, right? The people who knew me really quickly kind of moved into new ways of working. They knew they could anticipate my expectations. And the people who were new to kind of reporting into me, I was like, I don't understand. I'm asking to do this or I'm trying to do that. I don't understand why they're not doing that. Right. And what I learned was that I wasn't spending sort of enough time helping them understand like why I wanted to do different things or what was important to me or why it was important to the business. I just didn't have the level of trust with that part of my team that I had with the others. And I had to go fix that basically. I'm still working on that. They're still
Right.
relatively a year in, they're still relatively new to working with me. So I have to think about that a lot, that half of my team has a lot of background with me and half of them do not. And so what are like things I can do to help move that along more rapidly?
Was this different for folks that were your peers and then became direct reports for you?
That didn't really happen
It
in this
didn't. Okay.
particular restructuring. I would say that when I took on that's happened many times in my career, though, like in particular, when I took on the chief commercial officer role, that was a time when I moved from being on the commercial team to now leading the team. And I had a number of people who moved from being peers to reporting to me. Many of them, had longer tenures, longer experience sets than me. Many were men. And so that was an interesting period of time to navigate. And one of the things that I'm really proud of, there's a particular person whose experience I just massively respect. And he's an amazing leader in his own right. And a few months into sort of making that change, he came to me and said, I wasn't sure about how this was going to go down. And he was like, Anne, I'm just so happy because you're one of the best managers I've ever had. And I was really pleased with that. And part of it was because we had a lot of conversations around what help I needed from him. Like there were many things that I did not know or could not do myself. And so his importance on the team didn't change. His leadership on the team didn't change. And so I think that really helped us develop a different kind of relationship that ended up being really, really powerful.
I love that for you. My next question is actually nicely ties into it. I was going to say one of the things I especially hear from women in STEM is just being seen as credible becoming a leader, whether it's, working with someone, men who maybe don't see them as credible for whatever biases are there, or, moving to a team with a woman, they never had a woman leader before in STEM. I'd love to hear. So it sounds like your process there was just really respecting his credibility and developing a peer relationship of respect. How did you maintain that boss? I don't want to call it boss subordinate, but you know what I'm saying, that line without becoming, sometimes I hear women are too candid, too tough. I actually just posted something on LinkedIn about that. She's too tough. And then others being too soft and she's not respected. How do you maintain that balance really nicely? I love your example that you just gave.
Yeah, that's a tough question. And I think that it really is going to be different for different people.
Yeah, I'm interested in your
And
journey.
kind of bringing your own authenticity and your own, who you are is important. I think when you hear things like someone's too tough or someone's too soft, I find that really difficult because in my estimation, people are just being who they are. And what they need to do is find ways to both find their natural tendencies as strengths and find ways to pull out different parts of them when needed, like
Right.
when that leadership style is needed. And I think in this particular example with that particular individual, like my general take on this is that you find credibility by just being your authentic self, right? And when I talk to this individual, is that here are the things that I don't know. And here are the things that I feel very strongly that I do know. And some of those things we have overlap in, and some of them we have differences in. And the differences are what matters, because the differences are where we can help each other. And I think just being very upfront about what I felt strong in and what I felt that that person was strong in and why that was symbiotic, I think was part of what built that relationship. But I think that same thought process is really useful for leadership in general. Like I said, I think, one of the things I sort of learned along the way was this idea about sort of your natural tendencies being your strength, right? And there are plenty of different schools of thought that think about this, right? Strengths finder or things like this. But I had a really important conversation with someone I consider sort of a mentor sponsor of mine many, many years ago. And we had a leadership team that did, I don't know, it wasn't DISC, but it was like something like that. And probably I was one of the only ones in the group that was like a particular style, as was that leader who was, very senior to me at the time. And I had a conversation afterwards and I was like, oh my gosh, like everybody else on the leadership team is this way or this way. And like, I'm never going to make it. And he was like, no, actually, like the fact that you are different than the others is what matters. And like, he's like, I've learned to find my natural tendencies as a strength and figure out how to leverage those. And he's like, there's a reason why that leadership team is probably all the other style, because it's not me. And I use that to kind of help drive my own leadership. And I thought was really impactful for me and useful to think about, first of all, the things that you do, maybe being soft in certain situations, is a huge strength. It's a huge strength that it will help people feel comfortable with you. It will help you be empathetic and compassionate. On the other hand, like being very blunt and telling people what you want is also very powerful in certain situations. And so people, women in particular, shouldn't approach this as one is good or bad, but this is who I am. And this is how I leverage that as a strength for my leadership.
Thank you for that. I love that. So you're actually saying, so many times I hear people say, you just be authentic, but no one ever does a really good job of saying, that's kind of a buzzword at this point. But what you just did was explain exactly what behaviorally, and I'm a big fan of the assessments in personality. Anybody who knows me, that's sort of my sweet spot. But you did a really good job of explaining what it means to turn up as authentic. So really nice advice for folks listening on here and thinking about what does it look like to be someone who's authentic. So excellent and really interesting. Thank you for that. So let's change gears a little bit. We all have moments in our lives. I don't know if we call it a watershed moment, but sometime when there's a big challenge and it sort of is a light bulb and something that was really hard or maybe didn't turn out the way you had expected or even the way you wanted, but it just was a huge learning for you that maybe altered the way you did something. I know women that are listening to this and looking to you as a senior leader that's been just super successful would love to hear something in your life that maybe was disappointing, but was a super learning for you and changed things for you. Do you have something like that you can share with us?
Yeah, probably a few. I think one of the biggest ones that just really think about a lot and I think really shaped, a lot of things that I did later in my career happened when I was abroad. I had a role and worked in Ireland and I was running operations in a manufacturing plant.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, the global company decided that they were going to close the plant.
Oh.
And so the leadership team started to kind of, under confidentiality, make some plans about how we were going to do that and what kinds of things needed to be done. And we did a lot of planning up until the point where we made a large announcement to the whole site that this was happening. This is a pretty large site, several hundred people in a smaller town in Ireland, right? So it's a big impact. It's sort of a community impact. And we eventually kind of pulled together the whole site for, a big town hall and announced that we were doing this site closure. One of the really big challenges was that it was a long wind down. And so maybe what not everyone appreciates is that In pharma, when you register a drug product or a drug, you also register where it is manufactured. And so if you want to change that, you have to change the registration with agencies, and it takes some time to approve that registration. So that means that, and this was a site that served rest of world. So basically every country except the US. Long list of registrations to change, which means the taper of the site and how long it had to keep running at different levels of capacity for the next 5 years was a really long tail. So we had to tell people this was happening, but then also tell them, but I need you to keep working until X date or Y date, and it's all going to be different for everybody. So first of all, I think one really interesting leadership lesson from that was, first of all, standing up in front of everyone and telling everyone that they're going to lose their jobs, kind of self-included, all of the leadership team also had their roles impacted, was super difficult, and I think coming back to the idea of authenticity, being able to also express my own sorrow in that I think it was important for me. It was a catharsis of sorts. And it was also important for other people to see that, it isn't sort of someone else making a decision and nobody cares, right? It is a very difficult thing for leaders too. And so, that was, I think, a really great lesson in using your sort of authenticity to lead. What I was really proud of was the way we enabled the people at the site to make that closure really useful for them. So we found ways to let people try new roles so that they could put something new on their resume. We found ways to come up with creative incentive plans to make staying through their wind down period longer. We found ways to, do internal career coaching. There were a number of people that left that site that went from being sort of operators on a manufacturing line to project managers, or to, in some cases, went back to school and are now engineers. So I'm really proud of how we used that really difficult moment to change the course of many people's lives on the team. I think that's really cool. And I think the other thing was the leadership team that I was with then, I'm still very close with, because doing that hard thing together kind of bonded that group in a way that was really impactful. And we kind of return to that and check in with each other and see what we've learned since. And so in every sort of piece of adversity, there are these useful glimmers of light that are helpful for people to forge a new path and think about what they'll do next. And what I got out of that is, again, kind of returning to this idea of really helping people know how I'm feeling about something, and leading with empathy and compassion, and finding ways for people to make the best of whatever situation they're in. And that doesn't have to happen when things are going bad. You can apply that as well when things are going well. And in high growth periods at Ginkgo, how can we give people new opportunities for roles? How can we let people try new things? How can we help people grow? It's a lesson that applies really universally, I think, that I wasn't kind of bold enough to do until the hard thing happened, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's great. That's a great example. And I love that you're proud of something that maybe wasn't so great at the time. Is there anything, that you look back with all your years of experience now and you can say, wow, I really wish that I would have done this differently?
That's interesting. I want to come back to the last story really quickly, because I want to tell people the end of the story.
Oh, okay.
At some point I also had to leave the site, but the site did not shut down. Ended up getting very small. Most products had moved. The company attempted to sort of sell the manufacturing facility for a while. And instead, I think the team that was left was doing so well, and a number of other circumstances. It's now the flagship manufacturing site for Keytruda, which is the largest,
Keytruda, of course.
the largest product that Merck makes. And so it has a new life and has been reinvested in. And so, it's just a really cool end to the story.
Wow.
So sorry, to return to your question about what would I do differently. I think one of the things I would probably give as advice to other people is to be a little bit more bold in your sort of career choices and movement. So I think in some roles and different things, I probably hung around longer than I should have. And one of the things I think that happened to me is that I thought early in my career that careers were very linear. And if I just took all the right steps, I would get to like X, Y, or Z, right? But I guess for steps, like I draw on like vector calculus, right? Like what I learned is like careers are path independent. And there are many ways to get from A to B. And so probably being someone who is an engineer by trade, like I like exactness, and I feel like there's probably a right answer, but I don't think that's true in your career. And so, first of all, knowing that it was path independent is very freeing, but it also puts the onus on you to kind of decide when a change is needed. Like, when are you no longer growing in this role? When should you step out for something new? Like, when should you be bold and try something that maybe you're not as confident in? And so the move from me from a very large company to a very small startup, in particular, a startup when I joined, I mean, I don't think there was even like a job description when I joined. It was like, join the company. And that was a very huge change, but also like has fostered some of the greatest growth that I've had in my career. I think one interesting thing, my own husband was sort of like, nothing bad will happen if you take this job. The worst thing is you just want to do something else. And there's nothing scary about that. And I think both for scientists and engineers, first, I think we probably think there's like a X, Y, and Z way to do things, but also maybe a tendency as women is to play a little bit safer. And I think like I've had to learn a few times that actually stepping out for something that feels a little bit scary is probably a place of growth for you.
This might be what you just said. I'm not sure, but I always close with this. This is the undeniable take. So one truth you'd give to the woman who is ready to lead in a senior role, but still is being underestimated. So in other words, she's got it. She knows she's got it, but she needs help cracking the code like you did. So what would you tell her?
I would probably tell her that she already has what it takes, and trusting in her own ability to learn and her own ability to lead and respond is going to be enough. And I think that if you're in a role or in a company that is underestimating your abilities or your capabilities, like probably time to change. It's probably time to go somewhere where you are appreciated for the leadership qualities that you can bring.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. This has been amazing. And I can't wait for people to hear your amazing advice and all your terrific stories on your journey to becoming a woman who has cracked the code, women in STEM. Thank you so much
for having me.
Thanks for joining. For more unfiltered advice and tools that drive real business value, subscribe to our newsletter, connect on LinkedIn, or book a consult, because leadership development fails when we solve the wrong problems. Find all links below.